Hi, and welcome to the user guide for NormalizePBR. In this guide, I'm going to go through each and every setting and show you what they do. Let's get started. So first up, I'm going to click my open button. I'm going to go ahead and open up a picture of my kitchen floor. Now on the left hand side, we have our sidebar. And we have our reset global settings, and this resets the program to factory default, like all the settings, so you don't have to keep opening it and reloading it. Then we have the lock icon, where you can put your key for the pro version, and if you wanted to buy it, you can just click this button and it'll bring you direct to the website. Under here we have screenshot buttons. One is with the UI included and one without. And we have our info panel with the legal, control keys, general information about the program. On the bottom right here, we have our split view slider, and you can just slide it left and right. And on the left hand side is a full material output, and on the right hand side is the original base texture for each channel, so you can see what you're doing. Then we have our primitive panel. We just have some basic primitives to give us something different to look at. On the bottom we have our lighting, which is high dynamic range. Underneath that is the effects like bloom, post-processing. I'll go through these later in the guide. And our options panel. Another feature is you can rotate the object around with your mouse by clicking it. And the split view stays constant in the middle of the screen and will update as you move it. Next, I'll go through the settings. So we have anisotropic filtering, and that just removes jagged edges. It's like a performant version. And we have multi-sample anti-aliasing, which is a more performant intensive method of getting rid of jagged edges on low resolution outputs. And we have our frame rate display. Right up here in the corner, it'll show you what the frame rate is. The lower it goes, if it gets past like 55, it'll turn red. And we have our full screen button, which will get rid of the border. Font size. And the font size will get saved to a file, and it'll remember where you had it set when you open the program again. Then we have color for our panels, so you can customize it to your liking, and it supports transparency. All you have to do is use this little slider on the bottom. Now this box right here is the only thing that isn't controller supported, so you will have to click with a mouse if you're using a controller. Everything else is selectable and editable with a controller, like an Xbox 360 controller or whatever you got. Now we have temporal anti-aliasing, which will smooth out the screen and make it look a little blurry, but make everything look better. Then we have debanding, which will get rid of some of the compression artifacts, and lossless workflow mode, which will force use of non-compressed textures. Then we have our texture limiter based on percentage. So if I have a texture that's 1024 pixels, if I do 50%, it'll be 512 pixels, and so on. And the reset button will reset the menu settings. The color and the font size have memory, so they'll remember where you had them set. And here we have our effects window and the lighting. And like I said, we'll go into that next. So in this part of the guide, I'm going to show you what all of our material channels do. We'll start with the albedo or the diffuse. It supports both workflows, albedo or diffuse workflow. And the way we make a albedo texture is just the same thing as a diffuse texture, but without shadows or highlights. And this can also be used to even out the texture to make it tile better so you don't get different gradients of brightness. First setting is the scale. Now this is only visible in the tool and it will not affect the exports. It just helps you see how things are tiling. So it cleans it up, gets rid of the shading, helps it tile better. And brightness, contrast, saturation, same as a photo editor. Color tints, and here's the tint mixer. So you can adjust your colors. Next up we have solid view. Now what solid view does is it shows you the full material workflow without any color. It just helps it where you can see how the light is affecting the object a lot better. Turn up our scale a little bit. And triplanar mode is just a different form of UV mapping. It doesn't affect the exports, and it's just for if you have like a texture that's tricky with seams. So you see the seam right here. If we just hook up triplanar and turn the blend up, it'll remove the seam and make things look better when you're working. It's just a visual effect though. Combined AO, what this does is it combines the AO with the diffuse texture. And if we zoom in, we can look a little closer. And instead of using like a channel pack texture set, you can just pack it in there and save a texture slot. And you can pack the roughness into the alpha. This button right here, the alpha, uses the original alpha. So if you're using like the program to make leaves or fences or anything with transparency, you want to have that enabled. And seamless mode will make your texture tileable. This texture is already tiled, so it won't really show you what it's doing. So in later sections of this guide, I'll do a bunch of different textures and show you how that works. And then we have our export properties. JPEG and PNG are the supported formats in this program. It's limited for now, but this is just what Godot supports. And that concludes the albedo. Next we'll go up to metal. Since we're not using it, I'll just briefly go over it right now. So black is no metal and white is full metal. So white is full metal. Got our brightness, contrast, just like a photo editor. And the texture, we'll use a grayscale texture. So white will be metal, black will be non-metal. And then you can mix that in with the global to really dial in your metallic levels. I'm not going to be using it in this one, but I'll show you on a different texture that I'm going to do. And you can also pack the roughness into the alpha channel. Some engines use this setup, so it comes in handy. Next, we're going to go over AO. I made everything very simple and do most of the hard work in the back end. It's just a simple amount slider. And a lot of times, depending on how grainy the texture is, the AO can look grainy. So I added a blur in there. Smooth it all out, and then you can change the directions with the inverts. Next we'll go over rough. Same settings. Black is shiny and white is really rough. Then we have our detail level. I like to set it around 50%, and we can blur it too. And you can also invert the directions. Global invert. Next we'll go up to specular. White will be really like reflective. and have hotspots, and black will have no specular highlights. I just like to set it around there, keep it default for now, since this is just a floor texture, nothing fancy needed. Normal. Default settings work good. Zoom in a little click. And you can set your blur. And the cool feature of this is you can pack your displacement texture inside the normal map for like parallax effects or vertex displacement in game engines. So that's a really handy feature. But just make sure to use PNG format because JPEG doesn't support the alpha channel. Next up, we have our displacement. Same thing as the diffuse. You can remove the highlights or shadows, adjust the brightness, contrast, or add blur. And I'll go to full view. And we have parallax. This is a fake displacement that simulates vertex displacement. It's a lot cheaper in games, but the same texture can be used for vertex displacement or parallax. It don't matter. And what I like to do is just blur it up a little bit and see how that expands. Works good for different kinds of materials like rocks or bricks or stuff like that. It'll be more prevalent in the next textures that I use. And we have our mask texture. Now in game engines like Unity or Unreal, they have a pack texture you can use where you store multiple different textures inside of one to save resources. Unity's setup is what I like to use, especially in Godot, with a slight modification. So I'll add the metalness, and we go AO goes into the G, and specular I put in the B channel, and roughness in the A. And this doesn't matter if you have the alpha enabled or not, but this is what it looks like. It's like a transparent type of texture, and if you change it, it'll change the look of the mask. Reference your engine to make sure you know how they set it up, or if you're using custom shaders, it's flexible. You could set this up the way you want it. And the end result looks like this. Now I'll talk about how to control the lighting. You can hold your shift button on your keyboard and right click and drag, and you can move the light around. Helps you be able to see everything a lot better. Now next I'll go over the lighting system. By default it has a solid background, but there's a whole bunch of HDRIs packed into it. And when I'm using HDRIs, I like to disable the sun energy first. And we have 9 different HDRIs to choose from. Skybox, nighttime, I'll just go through them all real quick. We have like a Christmas scene here, and all these are downloaded from HDRI Haven, all CCO licensed textures. Just some indoor lighting, outdoor lighting, another indoor studio lighting. Then you can add in your sun lamp, really blend it nice, adjust your field of view of the HDRI. Now this is the exposure, and this adjusts the whole program's exposure, not just the HDRI. Also you can do the rotation. Now the white point will control how hot the hotspots and highlights are. Don't want to go too far with it. I like to keep it around 50%, and saturation go. Alright, and where we have our tone mapping. So this currently supports Filmic, Aces, Reinhardt, and Linear. I like Aces. Reinhardt's a little flat, and Linear is just your basic. Filmic looks pretty good. ASIC is a little less washed out looking. And you can adjust your exposure, really dial in, get a nice preview of your material. Next, we have our post-processing stack. Screen space reflections. Then we have sign distance field global illumination, which is like a Godot's global illumination system. It helps get that nice indirect lighting from the HDRIs. Depth of field. Now, there's an issue with the depth of field. It doesn't, this is an inherent issue with a Godot engine, I'm pretty sure. But you want to disable the alpha. So if you're not working with transparent textures, just disable the alpha and the depth of field will work nice. There's some kind of issue with the Z depth. I'll update the engine soon and see if it fixes it in the future. Still haven't found a fix for it, but it's not really going to affect your textures at all, so don't worry too much about it. Now we have glow, and then normalized. We'll normalize that glow to a 0 to 1 range. Intensity, threshold. Now all this stuff is just visual effects to make your viewport look pretty. Different kind of additive modes. I like additive. And chromatics. So it gives you the red blue edges to help it look like a camera made it. And if you wanted to take a screenshot of your material, you just press the screenshot button and it'll save to the same directory as the original file you loaded. And that concludes all the settings. Also, you can adjust the background colors. And the indirect lighting will still be dependent on that background color. So if you don't want any indirect lighting from the background, just turn it all the way to black, a value of 0. Now, in the next part of the tutorial, we're going to try it on a transparent texture. I'm going to go ahead and open a grill texture that I had. Go to flat plane, go to the high dynamic range, disable my background, turn the alpha on, and then I'm going to remove the depth of field. Tile it up to see how it tiles. Zoom in a bit. Now it's a low resolution texture that I'm using. So metal, we're going to turn this all the way up with the texture. A little bit of global, a little bit of mix. And we'll move this all the way and try to move our mouse around and get a better view of the metallic reflections. Next we'll go to the AO, blur it a little bit. Go to roughness. Now metal's shiny, so we're going to use a darker color. And this texture is like really low resolution I'm using for a reason. And it has some artifacts, so what you can do is just use the blur slider in case you have a low resolution image. You just blur it out and it'll fix it up. Specular, I just like to leave it default. And the normal map picks up all those artifacts because it's really accurate. And you can just blur it and it'll fix it up real nice. Displacement, I'll just kind of get it, remove some of those shadows, and we'll go into the full mode. And I'm going to add a little bit of blur and then add the parallax. See how that starts to jump out at us? That's looking kind of good now. Now I'll go over how to save the images. So in this folder, I just have my test scene. And all you have to do to save the images is select channel first and press the save button. It'll show you exactly where it's saved. And then you can go to like metal, save it, AO save, roughness save, specular normal, and the mask texture. I'll go over that now. And I'll do Unity setup. So AO, I like to add the specular in there, and the roughness. Now, depending on all the values you set, it'll look different. If you're not using like a specific channel, like I'm going to make this empty, it'll give it a different look. If you're using alpha from the original texture, it'll also make it look different. You just save it. Actually, I forgot the specular. So resave, and it'll overwrite. And you can see here all the different types of textures we saved. Next up, I'm going to do this leaf. Or actually, we'll do the manhole cover. So I'll go here and navigate to my manhole cover. I'm going to reset it. We're going to turn seamless off because it's not a tiled texture. We'll turn the alpha on. And go to solid view. See what we're working with. Now this texture is also a low resolution texture. And I want to smooth it out, make it look a little bit nicer. We'll add the metal look. A little bit of the global. Go to AO, we'll add a little bit of blur. Roughness. We're going to reduce that detail to get rid of those fine details. Maybe turn the contrast down a little bit. Blur it. And you can invert it. Here's the thing, like Unity uses smoothness and other programs use roughness like Blender. So if you need smoothness for Unity, you want to click invert before you export. And that'll switch the channel around to make it compatible. Next up, we'll go to specular. It's about good. Normal map. Maybe I'll do a little blur. We don't really need too much blur. Now here's where parallax can look really good. Let me go back and remove solid view so we can see what we're doing. Go to displacement. Go back to my regular view. I want to turn the contrast up and add some blur. And that'll make the parallax and displacement pop. I love this effect. And then you can just save out all your channels. Next up, we'll try foil. A picture of aluminum foil that I took. See, by default, everything looks pretty good. Where do I start? Tile it up one. Keep it. Go solid view. Now it looks really grainy. Turn the chromatics off. Make it cleaner. Roughness, we're going to reduce the detail. AO, we're going to add a little bit of blur, smooth it out. Seamless mode. This is a good texture to show seamless. So by default, this texture isn't tileable. I'll just click seamless, and then it'll be able to repeat nicely where you won't see a seam. If you use this seamless thing on bricks, you might see a seam. So that kind of stuff you might have to do by hand still. Normal map's looking good. We'll reduce it just a little bit. And for the metal, I want global all the way to 1 like that. We'll go to the ball. Now we'll move the light around, check out how it looks. I'll do a little blur. And what next? See how the light affects it. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. Maybe I want to increase some brightness. Next up, I'll do a leaf for some vegetation. I'll go back here, turn the seamless off, go to my flat plane. Now, when you look in the viewport, the base object is a square, but this will export the same ratio, like the aspect ratio that you imported. So the smushing of the image is just a viewport thing. It doesn't affect the exports. All right, now we're gonna go and click our alpha. Zoom in, try to get a different angle. Add a little bit of blur. Roughness is pretty good. You want some wet leaves, turn it down a little bit. Now these are all low resolution images I'm using that have a lot of artifacts. But just add some blur and it smooths it out. Makes it look a lot better. Displacement. Self-explanatory. And a little bit of parallax for effect. You can use your cylinder for stuff like this. And this just affects the exports. Now the free version is locked to 512 pixels exports, and the paid version is unlimited. So I hope you learned how to use the program. I think I went over everything pretty good. But if you have any questions, let me know and I'll update this or whatever. And I also have the PDF user guide, which goes into a lot more depth about everything. So hope you enjoyed the program. This is my first professional software release. So if you find any issues or bugs in there or something, just let me know and I'll do my best to fix them up. Any ideas for features or whatever, let me know and I'll try to program them in. It's a brand new program and who knows where it will go in the end. But I'd like to thank you for watching and using the program. Have a great day.